Hi, I'm Lisa Casenti. I'm a special education teacher, an author, a speaker, a breast cancer thriver. And one of the things that I absolutely love to do is to network and connect with people all over the world so that we can collaborate with one another, share stories, and share information. And today I am super excited to have Hedy Horowitz as a guest. And she is an amazing lawyer. She has 30 years of law experience under her belt practicing in New York State. Her primary areas of focus are estate planning and real estate. She is a Hofstra Law graduate, a Hofstra Law School graduate, and I'm fortunate enough to have met Hedy through Step Ahead networking group. So it's a networking group that we are both a part of. And when I did my one-on-one with Hedy to get to know her better, she gave me two tips that I think are really important for people to know about. So I invited her to come and make a brief recording with me so that she can educate many people. So Hedy, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today.
And thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Since you're into wellness, and that's one topic that we discussed, one of the tips I know I was speaking to you about was that having a healthcare proxy. Most people don't realize that when their children reaches 18, they're considered an adult, and that you have no say over any of their decisions, their healthcare decisions. A lot of people say goodbye to their kids, pack their ramen noodles and their school supplies and send them off to college. One of the things that's very important that they should have is a healthcare proxy, and to make sure that if their kid is a health problem, that they will be able to be in touch with the school or in touch with the hospital, to have some say over the health of their child.
Yeah, that is absolutely critical information. And I know a lot of families that sent their kids off to college, and I have not heard one of them talk about the healthcare proxy. And I'm so glad that you brought it to my attention, because that's something that's so necessary. And regardless, if they're not going off to college at the age of 18, there should be a healthcare proxy in place so that parents can make those medical decisions. And a lot of people think, well, if there's an issue, of course, I'm going to be able to make those decisions for my child. But that's absolutely not true.
Correct. Yeah, that's once the person reaches 18, they're a majority, and they need to give their parent a healthcare proxy.
And so that's an important decision to have with your child before your child turns 18. And Hedy, I know you talked about just even changing the language when you explain to a teenager what a healthcare proxy is, because you don't want them to have fear. There should be no fear centered around creating this document, but this document is protecting their right to have their parents make medical decisions on their behalf when they can't. So how do you approach that? What is some of the language that you use when you talk to teenagers?
Well, that's one thing, because normally with an adult, we have what's called a healthcare proxy / living will. So you give somebody, if you can't make a decision for yourself, you have somebody appointed as agent, and they make those decisions for you. The second part of it is the living will part, which basically talks about not wanting to sustain life if you have a terminal disease, feeding tubes. That is something that we don't like to speak to young adults about, because that is very scary. So the difference is that for young adults, we just do the healthcare proxy, and for adults, we do a healthcare proxy with a living will, which also speaks about not, going above and beyond to keep the person alive. And that's the big difference between something we'd recommend for a teenager versus a regular adult.
I love that you're changing the language, because you can absolutely scare teenagers into not wanting to do it. And I think there's so much fear centered around creating a will, planning for the future as it is. So you don't need to put fear there. So that's wonderful. And I do think having a living will in terms of adults, I think that that is a gift that you can leave your family, or you can at least have in place so that your family doesn't have to be making these decisions on your behalf at a time that is so emotional. We don't want to be making these decisions. And I remember with my grandfather that these were decisions that my grandma had to make at a time that was so emotional, and you don't know if you're making the right decision. So to have that, something like that in place, and it's very simple to do, Hedy, is that correct?
Oh, yes, very simple. It's a 2-page document. We even changed our living will part of it in the last 2 years as well, because it used to say that you don't want to be intubated. There's certain things you don't want. Now, with unfortunately what's happened with COVID, people are intubated, but they come off of it. And before, it used to be known as, once you're intubated, unfortunately, you're not going to survive. So we've even changed that language to say we don't want to be intubated if it's a life terminal decision that there's no chance of recovering. So even in the last 2 years, we've tweaked the documents because of the current atmosphere with COVID. But yeah, it's a 2-page document, but I think it's so necessary, especially for college children. So necessary.
Thank you, Hedy. There was a second tip that you gave me that I also don't think other people are aware of. So a lot of people, and myself included, thought that if a couple is married and they don't have a will, one of the spouses die, that the estate would then go to the surviving spouse. So talk about this, because I think it's a misconception. I had it. So tell everybody about that.
Yes, and it is a misconception. Everybody thinks that if one passes, everything automatically goes to the spouse. However, that's not the case in New York State. The assets would be split between the spouse and the children. And the problem is that if the child is under 18, that the court has supervision over that. We had one where the child, I think, was 12, and it was split, and the mother had to go back every year to show the court how they use that money for the children. So unless you have, like, if you hold things jointly, yes, it goes directly to the other person. Or if you have a named beneficiary on one of your assets, that goes to whoever you've named. But if you don't, if something's just in your name, like a bank account, it gets split between the parent and the child. And that's not usually the way people want it. Usually they want everything going to the spouse, and then you take care of your children. And especially if you have to go to court every year to show the court how you use the funds for the child, it's burdensome.
Oh my goodness. And then it's bringing more emotionality to the situation, because every year it's that, that grief and everything. And we're in this situation, and I have to show how I'm caring for my child with my deceased spouse's funds. So that's tough. So that was an important tip too. One other thing I was hoping that you could talk about, because there's also some misconceptions about power of attorney and what that means. And I know you spoke to me, you said that there are different types of power of attorney. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, the healthcare proxy, which we were talking about, that's over, the personal and the health, having a proxy make a decision. Usually the power of attorney is used for more financial issues, so that if you become incompetent, or even if you break a leg and can't get to the bank, it allows somebody to be able to get to the bank and be able to do, move money around or do what they need to do. The power of attorney these days, there's so many items you can put in there. It depends on the person. It depends on what they're looking for. It's up to a 12-page document these days, depending on if you want to put gifting provisions, trust provisions. So you can even do kind of estate planning in your power of attorney as well, depending, again, how sophisticated you want to be. But more often it's again used for your assets, where the healthcare proxy is used for the person.
Thank you. And I love just understanding that power of attorney. It's not just if you have an issue where you mentally can't make decisions, it's you can be physically, something is going on, you can't get to the bank. I mean, you know, my story, there were times when I was very ill and couldn't do things, and my parents had to take care of things for me. So that's super important to know that. Are there any other tips that you would like to share? Because I do have one last question. If you don't have any other tips you want to
There's
provide.
just too many.
There's too many. I know. I
yeah,
have to.
Limited time frame, and don't want to get people crazed.
Wonderful. I do have one last question,
Sure.
Hedy, though. I just want to know, how can people get in touch with you? And I just want to remind everybody that Hedy practices law in all of New York State. So she is able to consult anywhere in New York State. But your practice, your physical space is in Nassau County. So if anyone needed to sign legal documents, you would arrange to meet them. But where can they get in touch with you? What is the best place to reach?
Sure. Yes, I am in Jericho. I'm in Nassau County. And my phone number, if anybody wants to reach me, have any questions, is 516-682-8220. Or if somebody would rather, I have my email address, which is and then Horowitz, which is HOROWITZ, at TASO, which is T as in Thomas, A as in Apple, S as in Sam, O as in Orange, law.com. So
Perfect.
you can call me, you can email me, open to any questions. Not a problem.
Thank you, Hedy. Thank you so much. And I hope this was helpful for everyone. Please reach out to Hedy. She's amazing. And I am so grateful for having met her. Thanks again, Hedy.
And thank you, Lisa, for having me on your platform. Thank you.
I so appreciate it.